Hi, this is Editor Karl for this episode. Um, I forgot when we were actually recording the episode to mention that for the movie being discussed today, we watched a VHS rip of the film. This obviously affected the quality of the movie, and at times you will see us discuss uh, this specifically, how the quality of the film affected our experience of it. So just go forth with that knowledge while you're listening to this episode. Hi, welcome back to the Cinema Crash Cinema Chats podcast. This is your host, Karl Javoiberg. I am, as not always, but as usual, joined by Aska, my co host. Say hello, Aska.
Ooh.
Oh,
Uh,
that's so scary.
yeah, that's who I am, right?
Oh, my scary co host, Ghost Aska, is here. Um, Aska, I have a bit of a confession to make.
Oh no.
You know how 2 weeks ago we recorded the episode on Helter Skelter,
Yeah.
and weeks before that I recorded an episode with Ali, right?
I think I've heard of that, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I actually after I recorded with Ali, I couldn't figure out how to end the call, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he was actually in the episode with Helter Skelter as well. He's very awkward, Ali, so he didn't say anything, but he was there.
He's British, of course.
Yeah. Well, I actually have another confession to make.
Okay.
I still haven't figured out how to end the call with Ali.
Oh. Wait,
He
wait.
he.
Realistically, what does that mean for us right now?
Oh well, it means that I think Ali is here with us right now. Actually, Ali, can you hear us?
No.
Oh, he said no. Oh, he said no. He's in here with us.
Oh my god.
Oh well, Aska, I know you've been really looking forward to making an episode about all three Hangover movies, but I think to appease the spirit of Ali, we actually have to talk about the Blair Witch Project first.
Yeah, I mean, this is like not that different from the Blair Witch Project, anyways. Right now, like
Yeah, it's the
this is some real horror.
Blair is their witch project. Oh, this is the scariest thing I've ever done. All right. How was that acting? Did you guys like it?
Wonderful.
Yeah, I'm trying to get back into the swing of things. Make Hamlet too. But yeah, we decided to bring Ali back on the podcast. He was so enthusiastic last time about making an episode on the Blair Witch Project. So Asuka couldn't say no anymore, which is good news for me.
Coerced.
How are you doing, Ali?
I'm good. This movie's good.
It's so good. And yeah, so this is going to be the Cinema Crash episode on Blair Witch Project. We're not sure when we're releasing it. It's more of a backup thing. But when it does come out, it will come out.
You will notice that it has come out by the time it has come out.
If you are listening to this right now, go forth with the knowledge that the episode is indeed out. Unless you're me editing this, of course.
Or me uploading it.
Or
Yeah.
my FBI agent hacking into my hard drive. All right. So, the Blair Witch Project. Ali, do you want to give a quick synopsis of the plot of this movie?
Plot-wise, this is a group of teenagers. They want to make a documentary on a kind of rural phenomenon of the Blair Witch, which was a series of like incidents that happened in this kind of rural American area, where a bunch of kids went missing and were found dead. And there's like a repeat sightings and folklore around this Blair Witch figure. So they go around and they interview. It starts off very like it's a found footage movie. If you weren't aware, they start off by interviewing like the locals, and then the meat of the movie is them going into the woods to start like actually making this documentary. Funky stuff happens. They end up getting extremely lost, and that's pretty much the movie. They get very lost, get very agitated with each other, very anxious. Shit gets weirder, and yeah, that's the movie.
Yeah, I think that's a good summation of it. If you are one of the 2 people alive who has never heard of the Blair Witch Project, the plot isn't the interesting aspect of this movie.
Mm-hmm.
The plot is an important aspect of this movie, but just read aloud like that, it sounds like any movie, right? But like Ali mentioned, this is a found footage movie, and some would even say that this is the found footage movie, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
The found footage genre, it's a bit in discussion where and when it started. It's nowadays it's commonly used in horror, but it wasn't always that way.
Mm-hmm.
Wikipedia has the first found footage movie listed as The Connection from 1961, which isn't a horror movie at all. And it lists the first horror movie to use the technique as Cannibal Holocaust from 1980.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen it, but I know there's like some discourse as to whether or not it actually is enough found footage to qualify as found footage.
Yeah.
Some people claim it to be the movie equivalent of the epistolary novel.
Yeah, no, that's pretty close. There's also like the original broadcast of War of the Worlds on the radio, like when the whole idea was like making it feel like a real radio broadcast that people had to like kind of take a moment before they realized, oh wait, no, this is a sci-fi story, not a real alien invasion.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's the found footage kind of where it started, right? Some people claim that found footage is like the horror movement that came after the slasher movement, which I can see. It for sure wasn't as huge, but we got stuff like, Paranormal Activity was a huge one.
Mm-hmm.
Cloverfield was pretty big.
Mm.
Movies like Wreck, uh, a bunch of other stuff as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people credit this movie as being like the start of that. Because
Yeah.
this movie was huge when it came out. It came out in 1999. The events, I think, are said to have occurred in 94.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which, that's an important thing, is the events that occur in this movie are made out to have actually happened. Not only by the movie, but also by the marketing material for the movie. And of course, word of mouth upon release. Which is kind of unheard of.
Uh-huh.
Mm.
Do you guys know of any other examples of that?
I'm sure there is some. Blair Witch is just the most notable for doing it. Like,
I think it's also because, like, I mean, Ali and I, we were alive at the time the Blair Witch came out, right? I don't know when it came out in the UK, and it's probably, Karl, I talked to you about this yesterday, right? Like, the idea that this was actually happening carried through for a few more years. I probably did not hear about this movie in 1999, but when I heard about this movie for the first time in my life, right, be it 2002 or 2005 or whatever, it was definitely right. Like the idea that this might be a true thing,
Mm-hmm.
which yeah, I don't remember that for any other film.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, this is because it's like it's fully believable as a like fan footage. Fan footage has become a lot more of just a stylistic use. Like,
Mm.
as you said, like the 2000s were full of shitty, like found footage video VHS movies, but like there a lot of them are still like very clearly not real. They're either badly done to the point of like, yeah, this is clearly fake, or clearly riding on the Blair Witch, or it's like clearly supernatural. So like it kind of
Mm.
loses the plausible deniability that Blair Witch has.
Yes. Yeah, I would for sure agree with that. And I think plausible deniability is something we'll get back to while talking about this movie. Uh, in terms of how it managed to trick people, I think what you need to keep in mind is that the world was extremely different back in the early 2000s, late
Uh-huh.
90s, right? Most people didn't have the internet. Uh, Forums and social media weren't as huge a deal, right? Like this movie couldn't happen today in the same way. I think that's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Because you would have so many like behind the scenes stuff. You would have people like debunking it immediately on YouTube, on Twitter,
Yeah.
on every social media online. Uh, this movie existed when the internet was pretty young, and actually, what it did was, uh, it's often credited as being the first like viral internet marketing stunt because this movie had its own website. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
in a time where most people didn't have websites, and the website was not set up to promote the movie. It was set up as like, do you know what happened to these kids? It was set up as these are three kids who went into the woods and no one has heard from them since, and we found their camera and there's some fucked up shit on it. When this movie premiered at a film festival, they handed out flyers for the movie, but the flyers were missing persons flyers.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
It said, "Have you seen these kids? Right? Call this number if you've seen these kids. They're missing." For the first year that this movie was out, so between 1999 and 2000, the IMDb page for the movie listed the actors as missing, presumed dead. So it's not strange that people fell for it.
Mm.
And also, like, people used to be more stupid. People used to be way more gullible, believing of word of mouth. Like I have to bring up, like in the 2000s, Jamie Oliver, right? Bad British TV chef Jamie Oliver had a bone to pick with chicken nuggets, and what he
Sure
went
did.
for. I have a point. What he went for wasn't that chicken nuggets are unhealthy, uh, that they're bad for you, right? What he went for
Mm.
was chicken nuggets are made from the gross parts of the chicken, which
Uh-huh.
realistically nowadays most people don't give a shit,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
If it doesn't hurt me, I'll eat it if it tastes good, right?
Yeah.
But back then, reading on a tabloid magazine, oh, they put chicken feet in their nuggies, right? You're eating the beak or the eyeball. Like that was more effective than telling
Yeah.
you that like, oh, it has trans fats and it is fried with this kind of beef tallow and the economic
Mm.
Yeah.
costs on the climate and all that didn't matter. So this is the kind of like the news media climate that we're in. Of course people are gonna believe this shit.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, that's just like, I find it so interesting how this movie was
No, for
marketed
sure,
in
yeah.
that way. It is a genius move, more or less,
Yeah.
that marketing stunt.
Absolutely. I mean, it worked. Yeah.
Yeah, it paid off massively. This movie uh, made 250 million in 1999 dollars, and it
Mhm.
didn't even cost 1 million to make.
That's a whole 3 loaves of bread nowadays.
Yes, for sure. But yeah, that's just I went on a tangent there. What did we all think about the movie? Aska, was your first time watching the movie.
Yeah, yeah. I
What did you
was.
think?
So I've been put on the record as the person who dislikes horror. I do respect it, but I do not enjoy watching it that much. I think it was like, I mean, as a film, it was kind of lackluster for me personally. Like, I mean, right? And I'm not like a person who just watches Hollywood films, obviously, but like,
Uh-huh.
there wasn't. It's hard to describe. It was anyways, it was still interesting to watch. I think the things it does, right, how it uses the found footage and everything, has enough merit that even outside of this cultural context of the late 20th century, it's still interesting. You can definitely watch it in 2022 and
Mhm,
get something out of it.
definitely.
Yeah, for sure. I uh, I agree with like the a lot of people will claim this movie nowadays as being kind of boring.
Mm,
Uh, I agree insofar as uh, I have a terrible attention span, and I think a lot of people do.
yeah.
And just watching people sitting around in a movie nowadays, it's very easy for me to reach for my phone, right?
Mm,
They're just talking or chatting in a tent. I have always, since I watched this movie the first time, stood by the opinion that it is so much more interesting if you start to think about it as like a movie.
yeah. A lot of old horror, like horror, just is so like ingrained in its time that you know old horror is barely still scary. So, like, this angle that the film is definitely going for in 1999 just falls away completely. This is not a scary film. In
Mhm.
the same way that the 1930s Dracula was scary in the 1930s, but nowadays it's just goofy, right? And, like, not every horror film has to be scary. Um,
Yeah,
just, I think it goes a bit more for that, right? Very immersive. And it is immersive. It's just in a different way, I feel.
yeah. I would claim this movie as being scary.
Okay.
I find it to be a scary movie. I know a lot of people do as well. I've found it more scary watching the VHS rip.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, Ali and I we talked a bit about scariness in horror last time we did an episode together. Go back and listen to that. Uh, it is very much dependent on what kind of mood the movie is able to put you in, and also your own personal experiences and stuff.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I it's not a movie that features jump scares or uh, any music at all, more or less, right? Uh,
Mhm.
we also talked a lot about how the musical score is something that really helps uh, setting up this like eerie atmosphere. Obviously,
Mm.
this movie can't really do that because it's supposed to be a documentary, more or less. But in terms of scariness, I thought it was scary at points. I think it's even more scary in the abstract sense, right? Like thinking back on it,
Uh-huh.
crossing it over with my own personal experiences of being in the woods.
I don't really have those, so like that's maybe.
Yeah, that might be a part of it. That might be a part of it. Just how real this movie is as well does a lot for it in terms of being scary to me personally.
Mm.
The fact that things aren't over dramatic, there's not a huge shot of CGI
Yeah.
freaky witch, right? Uh, there's not like it's minimalist in its horror, and I think that does a lot for it.
But are you implying that CGI praying mantis is not peak horror?
Well, I'm not qualified to speak on such matters at the moment, but I would say no, it is not. And I feel like that's a statement I can make in good faith and knowledge that it will not come back to haunt me. Yeah. Ali, you are a journalist yourself.
Uh-huh.
Did that make you have like a different take on this movie in any way? And also just
Um,
like your general thoughts on the movie, of course.
I mean, like access is a thing we always talk about in journalism. Of like you've got to get to like you've got to take the advantage of what access you have to a story, and like this movie's kind of like the quintessential example of that. Of like going around and doing like voxes with all of the locals and all of that stuff, and then it's like, okay, right, well we've got to find more. We got to go into the woods and like add more character to the story. Um, So the movie does a pretty good job with that, and then like obviously they get the most access they could because they end up right in an instant. Um, but like as a movie, it's I definitely agree it is scary. The VHS version makes it like so much more scary as a movie. As I've said before, like I won't go off on a huge tangent about VHS horror again, but like um the what the VHS cracks hide is just so effective for this movie because it's shot on such low quality equipment, and it's done in such a like authentically amateur way that like you can't quite be sure of what is actually in the frame, which is I think really cool. Um, there's like I said yeah, I think I said on Twitter like um, because of the nature of the format, like you see faces in the darkness when it's the night shots because that's like really generating the mood. And then once you get introduced to like the stick figure symbol, you start seeing it everywhere in the trees because like it's such an easy thing to like slip in there. But like I have no idea if they did slip it in there at any point in the movie, but like there's you kind of think you see it every so often. It's really cool in that way. Um, but I think what this movie does really well that like other found footage movies don't is how like well delivered it is. Obviously, we talked about the cultural phenomenon around it, but like watching it now, I can see why people were so convinced because the acting is like authentic teens. They managed to be very earnest in their performances without necessarily acting. It feels like
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of bad acting in the way you'd expect, but only through because that's how teens act and how teens act when they're stressed. It's very authentic in that way, and like that really adds to the whole like terror of things. That like you are convinced you are watching just like three teens who have got in way over their head, rather than Hollywood movie actors who are now pretending to be filming something on their like mid 2000s like film recorder. It's kind of it's really authentic in that way.
Yeah, for sure. Uh, Supposedly when the movie was made, the production team like they created this myth of the Blair Witch. Obviously, that's not a real thing.
Uh-huh.
Um, but apparently, 90% of the movie more or less is improvised, and
Mm-hmm.
so these the main actors would camp out in the forest, and they would wake up to like a note left behind by the director with like a line that they should get into the next encounter or a way that they should act or you should have a falling out this day or something. And then during the nighttime when the freaky shit happened, the actors had no idea what was about to happen, right? It was just the directors coming out and fucking with them,
Uh-huh.
which is so interesting to me because obviously, like, I think I read that this movie had like 20 hours of footage shot, which was
Mm-hmm.
edited down into 82 minutes, which obviously that's not like a good use of your resources, right? Your time primarily. But it is kind of like if you have a large enough quantity of something, you will end up with enough good stuff in there, right?
Yeah.
And I think that like having the actors themselves be surprised, be maybe even a bit frightened, does a lot to sell you on the fact that this isn't, well, definitely isn't pre-planned, but it also might actually be real.
Uh-huh.
And it's all fairly mundane things, right? Someone shaking the tent,
Mm.
uh, these like wooden effigies or whatever. They're not
Uh-huh.
like super scary. Uh, they don't have the most freakiest design ever. They're not covered in animal body parts and blood. It's just stick figures, but they're so clearly man-made by something, and we
Mm.
know that there's
Yeah.
something after them. That the brain fills in the blanks and then becomes scary. To kind of piggyback of what you said about like the usage of found footage and how you see things that maybe aren't there, right?
Mhm.
I think that's a really good thing that this movie does is it utilizes every tool at its disposal, right? And one of those tools is the imagination of the audience.
Hmm.
We've all been in situations where in the dark we think we see something and it turns out to be something completely different. Especially when we are scared, when we have the adrenaline pumping. And when you have this movie where a lot of it is shot in the dark, a lot of camera movements are so swift, and we know that the characters see something that we don't, right? The brain will start to fill in the blanks with something that we feel like we're seeing. And especially, say, if you're watching this in the cinema, you can't rewind, you can't fact
Mm.
check yourself. Uh, you're tagging your friend sitting next to you. I saw the witch. I'm pretty sure I saw the witch in the dark, right?
Uh-huh.
I'm pretty sure I heard something. I'm pretty sure uh, X, Y, and Z. And you can't fact check yourself by Googling either. You can't go, was the witch actually in
Yeah.
the Blair Witch Project? All you have is the word of mouth from your friends, from yourself, from anyone you know who's seen the movie.
This reminds me of a fun anecdote before we go deeper into that. When I was 14, I think, me and a friend, like me and some friends, we watched a lot of horror movies, even though I did not like them. One of the movies we watched was one of the Paranormal Activity films. I do
Mhm.
not remember which one, but it was probably the first one, maybe. In which you have like this family, right? And then usual paranormal activity stuff. They think something is happening, so they set up cameras and stuff. And it's like a family of two teens and like dad or grandpa or whatever. And at some point, the grandpa doesn't appear in the film anymore, like for no good reason. He's just not there. And then there is one shot in the film where you see like their living room, and under the TV, there's like a low board. And when I watched that with my films, I saw the grandpa's arm hanging out of that car, of that low board, right? And the others didn't see that. And I was like, "Holy shit!" You know, the grandpa hasn't been here for like 20 minutes. He got killed and like stuffed under that low board, and it's never mentioned. Like, right? And the others were like, "Well, we got to rewind. We got to rewind." We
Mm-hmm.
were dumb teens
Uh-huh.
who do not know how technology works. So when my one friend tried to rewind, the only thing he could do was rewind to the start or rewind forward.
Oh,
Right, so he
No.
was trying to go like 10 seconds back, and went to the start, and then he was like, "Okay, right, we can just like go forward from here until then." Right, it was like 80 minutes, 70 minutes, something like that, and we zoomed through too fast and got
oh
past
no.
that thing. And then everyone was just like, "Okay, you know what? We're just gonna believe you. We're gonna continue watching. We're not going through this for another 3 times." Just fun anecdote, similar to like the cinema. But yeah, I feel that by the like cinema thing, you can't rewind, but like one of you sees something, and I do not remember anything about that Paranormal Activity film except for that, and I think the ghost gets driven over by
Uh-huh.
a car later, uh, which
How
is
do you
funny. I
what?
don't know. I mean, maybe it was also like it might not have been the ghost, but like the protagonist running from the ghost, right?
Oh,
Running out onto the street, getting run over, and then just the film ending. I don't remember. It was like 2009 or something. Um, but yeah, going into that whole like seeing things, right? I think fundamentally there's like 4 ways of using the camera for horror.
Mhm.
There's right the character sees something, but the audience doesn't, which is a lot of happening in this film, right? Where they're like, "Oh my god,
Yeah.
what was that? I saw something," and then like the camera isn't pointed at it or something, or like generally something that found footage can use really well, right? They put down the camera for a bit, and then they run away or something because they see something. There's the opposite. The characters don't see something, but the audience sees something. As we mentioned, you might see something that doesn't exist in the dark, or you might actually see something because they put the camera down and like do something, and you see the killer, or the grandpa's arm in the lowboard. There's neither the audience or the character see something, which is a bit dumb, right? Because like nothing happens, but that's usually what leads to jump scares, right? Which
Yeah.
are commonly
Yes.
not that popular a form of horror because it's kind of cheap. But that's how that happens. It can create tension if you know something is there or you assume something is there and neither see it. And then there's obviously both of you see something, both the characters and the audience, which is just very straightforward. And yeah, that's like found footage, as I mentioned, right? With like putting the camera away, or you just have this half POV thing, but not really what they see. Found footage films just use these different forms of horror really well, and very immersively, right? Because if if you have an outside camera that like shows you something that the characters don't see, you're like immediately put into that cinematic viewpoint, right? You know you're watching a movie in that way, that you're supposed to see that. And then in found footage, right, it feels a lot more immersive because it feels a lot more coincidental that you see something.
Yes. Yes. The fact that it feels coincidental, I think, does a lot for it. If you compare it to a movie that has, I think, what you would call an omniscient camera, right?
Well, it's called an objective camera.
Oh, okay.
That's it, right?
Well, a movie where it has quote unquote normal camera work, right? In those cases, if the audience sees something that the characters don't see, that is directed towards the audience, it feels a lot cheaper. A jump scare that only the audience sees. When the audience isn't part of the movie in the way that we are in this movie, feels cheap. It feels like a way to get a reaction from me.
Yeah.
Without anything happening to the characters I'm following. But when you have this, right? When you have this found footage kind of pseudo POV style, then like you say, if I notice something that the character doesn't notice, I feel present in another way. And also, for example, with this movie, where I already know this is a real thing and these kids have disappeared or died, I'm thinking in my head, is this how she dies?
Yeah.
Is the witch gonna get her? Am I gonna get a glimpse of the witch? Is there actually a witch? Because there's also, like we mentioned earlier, there's this plausible deniability all of the time. The audience never knows more than the characters, even if we sometimes see more or think that we've seen more. More or less everything that happens in the movie has some sort of plausible deniability. It's entirely possible to come out of this movie going, yeah, the witch isn't real. There is no witch. And not only because we don't see the witch, but because of all of these things being fairly mundane, right? Because all of these things were actually done by people in real life. The kind of burial mounds are just some rocks placed on top of each other. The stick figures are literally just sticks bound together. The tent shaking is just the tent shaking, right? Could be done by the villagers. Could be done by...
I felt like it was just a group of other teens from the village, like pulling a prank on everyone throughout most of the film.
Could very well be that. It could be... I know some people claim that this is a movie about two guys fucking with a girl, right? These two guys, which she comes across as fairly pretentious, this girl. I can imagine bad people wanting to fuck with her.
Yeah.
Like she's a journalism student, you know?
Like even regardless, like, yeah, she is like like, granted, she is incredibly like overbearing in this movie,
Yeah.
but she is just like abused the whole time as well. So like, it's completely believable that, like, especially when Josh, I think it is, goes off at the end, and like the only thing like at the end of the movie that is like kind of tangibly like terrifying, like for like when you like break down the realism, is that she
Yes.
finds like human remains, like fresh human remains, and that's like the one moment that is like, oh, something happened. Whoever was fucking about was like, you know, has got some like pretty sick ideas of what they're gonna do. But like, beyond that, it's all very believably just, yeah, either teens from the village fucking around. That's a big one in like found footage of like any the movies that kind of take from this is like, if there's a Bigfoot movie that's like found footage. It's terrible. It came out of like, I think, early 2010s, and it's about a guy doing a documentary about Bigfoot. And like the idea is that the townsfolk who they were interviewing before have just been fucking with them. Um, and like, yeah, that's kind of another one in this. Like, it could be the locals who were very like, happy to talk about this
Isn't the Bigfoot film even by the same director as Blair Witch Project?
Different director.
Okay.
He may have done the Blair Witch guys might have done one, but there I think it's Willow Creek, the Bigfoot one. It's a terrible movie. It's like, it's everything wrong with like movies that like drew from the Blair Witch in every way. It ends on a jump scare of like a naked fat person. It's a very bizarre movie that doesn't really understand what it's doing. um, but yeah, no, I think that's one of the really cool things about this movie, and especially thinking of like the phenomena around it, that like there is no tangible like real answer to what is going on. It's all like, and it all works whichever the answer is. If there is actually a witch, like, yeah, it's an effective, like, these kids got way in deep over their heads with this, thinking they could do a documentary on it. If it's like the townsfolk, then it's like kind of plays into the American pastoral of like city kids
Yeah, that's almost
coming to
folklore-esque.
the rural abyss. Yeah. Or it's like the as you said, the two guys kind of tormenting this very kind of overbearing journalist. Like, there's so many ways to look at this movie that still work. There's nothing that kind of breaks the realism
And
of it.
it bears mentioning to the audience that we're talking specifically about this movie, unrelated to any sequels that came after, because, you know, this ceases to apply in that case.
I think there's also like,
yeah.
what really works for like the whole thing is that basically every US state has their own cryptid, right? And like, so this just fits into that
Yeah, for
whole
sure.
folklore stuff, right? Like, yeah, that's just another cryptid, but does it actually exist? Does it not? Right? It's not like there's suddenly like, right? If around here there's a monster in the forest, here in Germany, everyone would be like, yeah, that has to be some bullshit. But because
Yeah.
the US has such a rich story of like cryptids, it works better, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with that. There's also just
No,
like,
for sure.
I don't know, there's something that's like, aspects of this story as well could for sure be true, right? There could absolutely have been a woman banished for witchcraft in the 1700s. There could absolutely have been a crazy guy in the forest who killed children.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we have no reason to doubt any
Yeah.
of that. And the movie isn't about whether or not that was true either.
Yeah. And like the opening voxes with all of the locals is actually really effective in that way. Like, it does, like I always forget that like the mythos isn't real, because those interviews at the start feel so authentically like local townsfolk who have heard of these like this like these paranormal activities, and like they have very scattered knowledge of it. It's all kind of spread in folklore. Some people are just like completely against it. Like there's that one religious guy. There's like the coffee shop girl who's like, yeah, I guess I know what that is, but like, come on. And then there's people who are like super super into the mythos. It's all really
because also like I feel it adds a lot to the realism as well when they use the low quality of the tools. Right? Like they have a decent camera and they have a decent mic, right? But they don't have Hollywood equipment. And so things like they're interviewing one person, right? They're interviewing the one fisherman who's like, yeah, well, they say it's haunted, but I don't know. And then he's got his buddy who's a bit off in the distance. And he says, these kids never know when to quit or whatever. But he's too far away for the mic to pick it up. So she asks him to repeat himself and come closer, right? That adds to the authenticity of this like documentary thing.
There's also I didn't know that the Blair Witch like was just made up for this film, and I would have believed it's a real folklore thing.
Yeah, me too.
Right, like it absolutely came across as a thing that actually exists.
Yeah, and I mean like that creepy abandoned building for sure exists, which I've already discussed my prior experiences with abandoned buildings in the woods. There's a Venn diagram that's like forest at night, scary, abandoned building at night, scary, and then like the intersection is very scary. And so they go into the abandoned building, and it's like, I think this is the part where it's like, okay, this is probably fake. Because it's so overdone. Like, there's handprints everywhere.
Yes.
And it's like, did the Blair Witch have kids go putting their hands on the walls a billion times? That seems weird.
Yeah. I always forget about that aspect because I do think that the movie kind of sells itself short a little bit there with that aspect. Because, like, also, like, the end imagery, the most iconic image in this movie of the guy standing in the corner.
I think that part is
such
so
an
good.
effective way of doing it as well. Like, there's no jump scare in this movie. There is no, like sudden... Well, I mean, okay, there's no, like, sudden final murder or anything. The like real final image is the guy standing in the corner, and like we know what the significance of that is because we were told at the start of like the killer like made the kid stand in the corner and then killed one and then would make the other kid turn around. Like there is like it's a little silly like why is this guy standing in a corner like that, but like it works for what the movie is built up, and like it's kind of earned the tone at that point. The house is a bit of a weird one where like they could have just kept it as a decrepit old house and it would have worked just as well, because I do not want to be in a decrepit old house when I'm already like being terrorized. Like,
I mean, especially when you know precisely which abandoned house it is, right? Because that's also been explained in the beginning, right? Like how many abandoned houses could there have been in this forest, especially when we're being hunted by a witch and potentially through her magic powers getting lost in this forest, right? It's the same log.
Yeah. Oh, I love that bit too. Of it's the same log, and like, is it like do they know it is? Like, yeah. That's a great bit as well because it kind of plays into the American pastoral stuff of like, as I said, of like city kids being in the rural abyss, and like when Heather's like, oh, it's impossible to get lost in America now. We've already gotten rid of half of our woodlands, and like either they've been going in circles or they are like have really underestimated how much like green space there is still, even if it is being like slowly destroyed. You are still in like acres upon acres of of like woodland. There's a reason this section of wood just hasn't been like turned into like it hasn't been urbanized because
and Scary Witch,
it's fucking huge. Scary Witch, yes.
Yeah, I think the final scene is so very effective. Just to backtrack a bit, not only because we know the significance it holds, right, but also because we don't know what happens to the girl. Uh, we know that the guy stands in the corner. We don't know what happens to the
No.
other guy.
Mm.
We can only infer, and that's another
Yeah.
of those points where it's like, well, we could spend budget making it a part of the movie, or we could spend $0 and have the audience's mind do the work for us.
Yeah. I think they could very easily have like entirely ruined any of the catharsis the movie would have by like kind of solidifying anything at the end of the movie, and the fact that they don't just kind of really works for like the longevity of the movie as well, and like the fact that now it still is as effective even though like we know so much more about this movie. This movie has been canonized to such an extent that like unless you are
Yeah.
like it's very easy to brush off it, a lot of it, but like yeah, the fact that it is kept such a so
Yeah.
restrained at the end
and
is
like
so
especially
good.
for like not having a lot of influences when it was made, right? It's one of the earliest works of found footage. It's for sure the first time it's been done like this. The fact that it gets so little wrong is really impressive,
Yeah.
and supposedly also the main disappointment of the sequels.
Yeah, the sequel, like the direct sequel, Book of Shadows, I've heard a lot of good things about, but in the sense of it's a very bizarre early 2000s horror movie. As a Blair Witch sequel, it is something else. And then I know the new one, directed by Mr. Death Note himself, Adam Wingard, is like apparently atrocious, just like hands down awful.
It's also another one of those like uh it's still entirely in the realm of possibility that these two guys are just fucking with her, right? In the abandoned building.
Uh-huh.
I guess that's the part that kind of makes the folk horror aspect maybe not work. But I mean, you know.
Mhm. But how many like folk stories are ultimately a bunch of guys fucking about is the other thing. Is like
Almost unrelated. But on the note of fucking about, Blair Witch Project.
What? Oh,
what a segue.
Sorry, I've wanted to mention the fucking about and the Thorn parody thing since
yeah,
we mentioned the fucking about the first time.
the Blair Witch Project.
Yeah. Or the what was it? Erotic witch project.
Book of Seduction.
Yeah, Ali, you've gone down the rabbit
Yeah.
hole of Blair Witch parodies.
Yeah, this movie, like we've said before, like this movie has been like canonized. It is in the same way that so many like of the big horror movies have. This movie has been like ripped off, homaged, and all of those found footage has become like such an essential like horror like format. Even now in like different forms. Like I'm sure we'll get on to like the modern equivalent of stuff like Unfriended. Um, but yeah, like there are a ton of like parody films of Blair Witch. Jim Wynorski, who is known for doing a lot of like uh horny horror movies. I think he's done like 100+ movies, and most of them are like just like Dracula, but they're horny.
Yeah.
Which is impressive for Dracula. But yeah, he made like 5 Blair Witch parody movies called the Bear Wench Project, and I like the first one is on YouTube, and I was gonna watch it last night for the joke, but it got late, and I skimmed through it. I said this before we started recording, and like I got to a scene that was one of the scenes at night, but there was a girl with her ass out, and I was like, "Yep, I get what this movie is." You know, I don't know how you made 5 of these.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much porn that it's just all the same.
Yeah, and then there's like there's a bunch of like horny Blair Witch movies. There's the Erotic Witch Project, as we said. There's one called like a Witch Babe. There's a bunch of like I watched the Cartoon Network Scooby Doo like parody last night, which is very weird that was put on. Like genuinely for like kids TV, like kind of terrifying, even in its own right. Um, like ends in very goofy Scooby Doo style, but like the kind of lead up to it is very effective very effective like Blair Witch style Scooby Doo. There's also the Tony Blair Witch Project, which I don't know anything about. I just know it's like a mock of our government in the 2000s, which is funny. I've been trying to find that. I haven't been able to find it yet. But yeah, like found footage and stuff like that has just become so, I guess, overused in a way, or used in such a sloppy way. I said in the last podcast I was on, like the one of the Dawn of the Dead sequels is found footage, and it's abysmal. It's such a misguided movie. But of course, the quintessential Blair Witch parody is the Hip Hop Witch, which I encourage everybody to watch. That is like such an incredible piece of history.
Is that a Blair Witch parody?
It is,
Oh,
yes.
I didn't know that.
It's a Blair Witch parody. It feels way more like David Lynch's Inland Empire, but it is, for all intents and purposes, a Blair Witch Project piss tape. You get to see Eminem talking about getting fingered by the witch, and genuinely, like, we talk about the Blair Witch having like such an incredible like final shot. The Hip Hop Witch might just top it with what it goes with, and like genuinely incredible experience of cinema. I fully recommend everyone watches it at some
sounds
point.
amazing. From
It's so
also
stupid
what you've told
and
in
so
the past. Sure is a movie.
Blair Witch, like,
sure is.
It has so many, I guess you would call them iconic scenes, right? So it gets parodied a lot. Like the main one I think of is the one where she's crying and recording the apology after finding the body parts. That one gets parodied all the time.
Yes, yeah.
Which,
oh, of course.
I mean, with good reason, right? It's probably the most iconic scene of the movie, maybe matched by the guy standing in the corner. Very effective. And especially in the context of actually believing this movie. Probably kind of harrowing. But yeah, there's a lot of parody work on this movie. I had a really cursed comment before we started this podcast. I was gonna say, if this movie came out today, the Blair Witch would have been mega sexualized online. The Blair Witch would have been Lady Dimitrescu, right?
Absolutely.
But apparently it already happened back in 2000, so whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Dudes were horny in the 2000s too.
Yeah, I can imagine the tweets. I'm going out in the woods to see if the Blair Witch will eat my ass, right? It's
oh, mommy, put me in the corner.
Yeah, exactly. People on Twitter need to get like 1% of a pussy, right? It's insane.
But like also that's extremely what happened with like creepypasta stuff. Like, which is another thing that feels so extremely out of like Blair Witch's legacy is creepypasta stuff, like Slender Man especially, and all of those like rural folklore inspired ones. It's extremely, not only in just culturally, but yeah, like those also got like really weird, like weird treatment online of like how they were portrayed by
Yes.
maybe slightly confused teenagers.
Yeah, for sure. Now there would be so much like if this movie came out during the peak of Tumblr, the internet would die.
Oh yeah, the Blair Witch would be
Maybe that would be for the best.
Yeah. I mean, like, there's so much because I think about like even not just sexualizing, but like how the Babadook and the clown from It became like LGBT icons, and then Pennywise became a class traitor when he killed two gay guys in the horrendous movie It Chapter 2, right? I wish I could have seen what the internet would have done with the Blair Witch, to be honest.
Yeah, maybe it is true that like the two guys were just fucking with Heather, and
Yeah.
the Blair Witch is a feminist. Right?
Oh, yeah, so true.
Hmm.
Pop off
So true,
queen,
bestie.
as they say.
I think the Blair Witch just wanted to hang out with them in the tent.
Probably. Let me in! Let me in!
Yeah.
Let me in. But they kept running away all the time.
If you're cold, she's cold.
Yeah. I think an interesting aspect of this movie is also just like how much stuff it throws at the wall. Because the Blair Witch apparently does everything from child's laughter to producing slime and gunk to rifling through their luggage to making them get lost
I love that
to having children make handprints to making a guy kill children. The Blair Witch does a lot of things.
The slime is the funniest part of this movie. It's such a like you said, they throw so much at the wall, but like that's one that's just like, did they like think of that? And then someone was like, nah, we don't need to do the slime.
I mean, the only thing I can think of is that the guy, like, he was like, oh shit, I need to come up with something weird that can have happened to my luggage. And he's just, oh, it's covered in slime.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I guess it's canon that the Blair Witch produces some sort of mucus now.
Yeah. See, that's also probably something Tumblr could focus on.
For sure. Yeah.
Who doesn't love the goofy lady?
Oh. What would your guys' Blair Witch Sona be?
That's a good question.
Mine would look exactly like Lady Dimitrescu.
I think my interpretation of the Blair Witch would just be that meme of like the party and the guy standing in the corner being like, they don't know I'm XYZ something. And,
they don't know I'm the Blair Witch Project.
They don't know I was killed by the Blair Witch or something like that. I don't know. Oh yeah, I am gonna like take that final shot of the guy standing in the corner and doing like giving him a party hat and doing like
I don't know I'm standing in the corner.
Perfect.
That's a good thing to do, I think.
Yeah.
I think also, like as I said, when we're talking about parodies, like in the kind of social media age, I think social media horror is like a really interesting element of horror, mostly because I don't think it's ever really been done well. Like it's one of those things that I think, as we said, that like the Blair Witch couldn't have been made as effectively today just simply because the internet is the internet. And I think there are so many like faux found footage movies, stuff like Unfriended, that use the same kind of format to tell kind of similar stories, but never works as well. One, because typically very poorly acted and produced and made by less competent people, but like also just like the internet is such a ever-changing thing and like all-encompassing that it's so hard to really like create effective horror stories that well. Stuff like Unfriended is like, if you have an ounce of like computer knowledge, it becomes immediately like like any effectiveness it might have is all gone. Whereas like the Blair Witch obviously is we still talking about like what maybe is the true intended interpretation. Like there's social media, I think, is such an interesting place to explore horror, but just has never been done super well. One of the movies I can think of that is like maybe the most effective in a very different, in a very maximalist, like modern social media way is the movie Spree with the guy from Stranger Things, which is about a like streamer who goes around in an Uber murdering people. And it's like produced super like kind of found footage style. It's like super maximalist, and I think that is like how you kind of do found footage in the modern day, is just to like kind of play into the more kind of lavish culture that we like, and like as I said, like maximalist like style that is just works today. And like obviously I don't think there's anyone thinking that movie is real. Joe Keery is like a massive movie star or and like TV star, but like in terms of kind of capturing that essence, that movie does like a really weirdly good job, like kind of continuing that legacy. Whereas like maybe like Unfriended is very clearly just a weird Blair Witch style ripoff.
I do have to ask, Ali, did you see that they've made a Zoom horror movie?
I did. There's a few of those. There's I did wonder when the pandemic started whether we're going to see a wave of Zoom horror movies, and we certainly did. Everyone was trying to like turn their Zoom call into a horror movie. I've at some point got to sit down and go through some of the big social media movies, the stuff that's like the Tinder movies and the Uber movies.
I mean, Tinder is already like a horror movie thing. So, you know.
It is, yeah.
No, but
it is.
I think it's interesting. I think found footage is in an interesting spot, right? Because obviously, you mentioned we're in the social media age, how that affects things. I think one thing that happened with found footage, right, is it started trying to emulate other found footage horror movies. Things wanted to be the Blair Witch, but the Blair Witch didn't want to be another movie. The guys who made the Blair Witch, they claimed their main source of inspiration was that they found documentaries on scary phenomena to be very scary, more scary than actual horror movies.
Yeah, it's very like gonzo journalism in like that's the angle it's going for is so the vibes feel that way, whereas as you said, like every found footage movie that came after wanted to be the Blair Witch, wanted to be a found footage movie. So they're like, while still wanting that believability, which is why none of those movies work, which is why like the only other found footage movies that have really maintained kind of cultural relevance are like Paranormal Activity, which took a really interesting niche with it, Cloverfield, which is a big giant monster movie, so like there's no believability there anyway, and then I guess something like Lake Mungo, which I don't think is like huge, but is taking things in a different direction that is interesting.
Yeah, I did want to mention Lake Mungo as like being the one like other good found footage horror movie that I've seen, because it also is in the same vein of like it's very clearly trying to emulate not other movies but rather the real life, like documentary aspect of it, right? I think in a modern age, I think something that would be interesting to emulate maybe instead would be, these top 10 scariest things caught on camera, right? And you have the Burger King foot lettuce guy, like those videos, because those are genuinely, like, at least the last time I watched one, those are genuinely kind of creepy and unsettling in the way that they're laid out.
We need a found footage horror film about that like Logan Paul scandal, right, where he was in Japan and absolutely horrible, and just like him going into a forest to be like sensationalist and then getting killed. Also, my other question is, if Blair Witch Project was made in 20 in the 2020s would Heather be an e-girl or a VTuber?
VTuber would be incredibly funny. VTuber and like she's going around with like a rig and stuff as well.
No, she would be neither,
They
because
keep telling her to turn her avatar
this is
off.
the mainstream, so she would just be like a family vlogger.
Yeah, she'd be a family vlogger. That
right?
would make
Or like
sense.
a teen vlogger, like a young adult vlogger, makeup tutorial kind of profile.
Oh yeah, that's good.
Yeah. I wouldn't want to watch it though. No, but I think like Blair Witch also ends up in an interesting intersection of being inspired in that they chose to emulate something that hadn't been emulated before, and also being in this restrictions breed creativity kind of thing that you don't get with these big budget Hollywood blockbuster found footage horror movies, right? Like Cloverfield had the budget to have these huge, massive monsters, and good camera, mic quality, and for some reason a guy who feels like he needs to record it all, right? In Blair Witch, like one of my favorite aspects is that only one of the cameras has a mic attached to it. So in that final scene when they're running through the house, you first see the guy drop his camera, and that's the camera with the mic. And then you see it from the POV of the girl, but you hear it from his mic, so she gets louder the closer she gets to him. That's such an interesting quirk.
I wanted to mention that. Yeah, that's so good.
I think that might be because they only had one mic.
Yeah.
And like, of course, you can have that idea, even with a larger budget, but with a lower budget, you get those for free because you work with what you have. We don't have $1 billion to blow on crazy special effects. Let's just bundle some sticks together. Oh, it's the most iconic imagery of the movie, and we put it on the poster, right?
Yeah.
What some fellas can do with a camera in the forest. It's pretty cool. That's all you need.
As I said countless times last time, if you have a bit, well, granted, this movie was made for more money than I remembered, but like, if you've got a bit of money and a camera and the woods, like, you can make the greatest movie ever made.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you have some Blair Witch slime.
I mean, the whole improv aspect of this movie as well. Like, that's how I made movies. So I feel seen.
One other, like, I was just thinking about found footage, and we are talking at the start of like stuff that came before Blair Witch, but something that came a few years before the movie was a movie that's gotten a lot of like, at least in my circles, a lot more kind of recognition in the last few years, is a TV special called Ghostwatch, which was a BBC prank. Essentially, it was like it took like BBC in the early 90s, very reserved, very like, I mean, like, think about how like the cultural perspective of the BBC is now, make that like even more reserved, even more self-serious. Put in one of like the most respected like serious talk show hosts in it, and film a ghost hunting special on Halloween, and frame it as real. And it's really interesting in like the cultural phenomenon of like how effective it was. They took all of these like really well respected TV hosts, filmed these really effective like on site ghost watch sequences, and screen it on TV with the idea that it was a real thing. And it's like gradually it starts off very regular and gradually gets more like scary and more like threatening, which is a really interesting and really effectively done thing that could never be done again. Like, you can do it once, and they nailed it first try. It feels extremely, like I said at the start, of like the first broadcast of War of the Worlds, where they it was without the caveat of this is a story. This is a actual broadcast that is happening, and there is aliens. This is like that, but like a slow build up in a much more believable fashion that worked. I know from people who were kind of an age to have watched it and like kind of experienced it as it went through, and like I know it kind of like struck so many people of that age, especially like kind of people our age at the time. It was a quite an effective piece.
Yeah.
And like that was like 92, I believe.
Yeah, it was.
So like not long before Blair Witch, but like still in that sort of vein. And like I think there are so many like TV specials that try to like, you know, start off normal and then get ever more fucked up, and either they are very obviously like playing into the bit, or like they are very obviously failing to play into the bit. And like as I said, like you can do Ghostwatch once, you cannot do it again because you've already set up that this is a thing that can happen.
Yeah.
And like they know it first try. I definitely recommend people watch Ghostwatch if you ever have the chance. It's really an effective piece of horror.
Yeah, I think Ghostwatch has been cited also as one of the inspirations behind Blair Witch Project, right? Like it's the only other movie that really has the same kind of tricking people into thinking it's real. Like you mentioned World of the Worlds, but that wasn't in movie form. I for sure want to watch Ghostwatch at some point. I had been planning to do it before this episode, but I haven't found the time. I think like Blair Witch also, like we've already mentioned, it's a different time now. It can't really be done anymore. And I think that's fine in a way. It solidifies it more as like something that has happened and a milestone or
There are
pillar.
definitely ways for people to kind of recreate the Blair Witch, like in its own way, like do the next Blair Witch with the current environment we have. But like, because I can't think immediately how that is, when it eventually does come along, it will be as effective as the Blair Witch was.
Yeah.
Anything that is, but like, it's certainly not going to be anything that is trying to be the Blair Witch.
I mean, it's not like similar things don't happen anymore.
Yeah.
But it's usually more like viral marketing stunts, right? Like, do you guys remember?
Yeah.
I think it was a couple of years ago now that people started posting about they found like weird black obelisks here and there.
Oh yeah.
And it turned out it was just like some company that was putting them out there to do marketing.
Yeah, that's the thing now. We have like social media, and like anything you see is like, this is like a stunt by fucking McDonald's
Yeah.
to sell a Big Mac. Isn't that? This is to sell.
But for a
The Blair
solid like
Witch
couple
burger.
of days at least, people were like, "Oh, this is weird. This is interesting."
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing. Like social media, everything moves so fast that like to capture people for as long as the Blair Witch did
Yeah.
is really just too much. You can't. You would have to be such a landmark moment for this type of thing to capture people for as long as the Blair Witch did nowadays, because things will last like a day on social media.
Yeah.
And then it will get memed to death, and people will stop caring, or like it will come out that it was you know, it was an arms company that would try to be a recruitment agent. So it was like, hey, here's this monkey going on. Please join the United States military.
Yeah. You released Blair Witch in 2022. People don't even care about the plot. They just go, did you know that one of the producers on this movie actually lobbies for against trans rights?
I mean, yeah, people would be like digging into all of those things. But there would also be like immediately be movie explained videos on like YouTube and TikTok, and like there would be like big long Reddit posts about the movie, and everything around it would just be like watered down immediately. That there'd be no like any horror movie, any movie that comes out always gets ending explain videos. You can't possibly be like kind of ethereal or like vague anymore, because you're going to get the entire audience is going to Google like X movie ending explained, and there'll be like 30 dudes on YouTube who have made like the least like literate videos you've ever seen about like a movie.
Yeah, the mystery aspect of it wouldn't work.
I do have to say though, I do want to see a marketing ploy by McDonald's that is like the Ronald McDonald Project. And it's just
Yo.
it's just to tell people that like the fucking McRib is back on the menu or something. That would be funny.
If you venture out into the forest, you can find the fucking Rick and Morty dip sauce.
That would be good.
Yeah, for sure.
There's like there are already so many parodies of the Blair Witch Project, but you can always make more. It's great.
It is always morally correct to make a McDonald's Blair Witch parody.
I mean, like an It parody would obviously be like closer, but it would be funny to have like, and instead of like the slime on the backpack, it's ketchup, burger sauce.
Oh, do you think in one of the erotic parodies it's cum on the backpack? It's like
I am almost certain that is
Probably.
Oh, guys, someone jizzed on my shin. Why is there only jizz on my backpack? It's the same log, but the log is shaped like a big phallus.
Cinema.
Oh, it looks just like my penis.
And like the effigies are just dildos hanging in the forest.
Sure. Oh, and then of course, because there's dildos in the forest, you need a scene where the girl character like either implies they're hers and she's embarrassed, or implies that she wants to use them because
of course. Movie.
Yeah. Shall we end it off with some closing thoughts?
It's probably better not to go any further.
we've opened Pandora's box, and I think it's time to shut it again. Ali, do you wanna end with some closing thoughts of yours?
Yeah, Blair Witch, I think watching this, especially on watching the VHS version, one, very funny seeing all the trailers at the start, but really worked for this movie. It's one of those movies, and I said last time I was on that like the whole like 4K revolution of horror movies is kind of, while good for restoring a lot of stuff, has really watered down a lot of like movies that were meant to be seen like this movie was. And I think this movie, if you are watching it and you're like, I don't get it, watch it with the lights off on the VHS version that you can find downloads for very easily, and you get like why this movie is effective. Like I really urge anyone who is skeptical about it just to do that, and I guarantee you'll have a more engaging experience that way. And also just to consider, like, this was 1999, like it's very different time. Try and get yourself into that headspace. I genuinely think this is like one of the most, like, obviously it's stood the test of time. It is genuinely one of the most important horror movies, like one of the most engaging, effective ones as well, like for such a simple premise that has been tried and tested, and very few times actually worked. This is like deserves like the canonized like status it has, for sure. I definitely really recommend people watch it.
Yeah. Aska, you have any finishing thoughts? Seeing as you're the horror hater.
Absolutely watch the VHS rip just also for the trailers at the start, because like
trailers were good. There's like 30 minutes of trailers at the start of that.
No, I do think you can definitely watch that film. Again, I don't think it's scary, but that comes also with the knowledge that there isn't actually anything scary happening in the film. And I also did not watch it with the lights turned off, because I don't do that. But yeah,
that explains things.
Yeah, Blair Witch ending impact explained. Yeah, no. I think maybe don't watch all the parodies, but also, I watched like 2 minutes of the Scooby-Doo project, and it was wonderful. Yeah, no, it's a cool film. Yeah, there's definitely, it's very unique in the way. And I've gone on the record saying that horror is probably the most unique genre in film. And this is a good example of that. And if you have any interest in like understanding film and horror specifically, then I think the Blair Witch Project is definitely something you have to encounter at some point.
Yeah, for sure.
And also buy the Blair Witch burger at McDonald's.
By the McBlair.
The McBlair. The big Blair Witch.
For sure. Yeah, I agree with everything that has been said. It's one of the movies.
It's one of the movies.
movies. It's one of the most important horror movies. In my opinion, it is the only movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as we said, it's one of the most important movies to kind of understand, like, movies that have come out since then as well. Like, it's the same as like The Matrix. How every action movie, every action movie is The Matrix in some way. Like, most horror movies that have come out since, like The Blair Witch, are in some way The Blair Witch.
Yeah.
Even if they're not found footage, they're utilizing a lot of stuff that The Blair Witch did.
Like with movies, you have good movies and you have important movies, right? And even if you're not a person who necessarily sees this movie as good, I see it as good, but if you don't, I think at least everyone can see this movie as important, for sure.
Yeah.
If you like this movie, you watch Lake Mungo as well. It's really good.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I agree with everything Ali said. If you don't really find yourself in the right headspace for this movie, watch a lower quality rip. Maybe leave your phone in another room. Turn off the lights.
Oh, yeah.
And also,
I'm rarely.
Huh?
Oops, sorry. I'm rarely a boomer about people like being on their phone because I'm terrible with that. But like for this movie, I like seriously focus on the movie as best you can.
I mean,
like,
it's about going back to the 90s, right?
I completely disagree. What you gotta do is you need your phone because you're gonna download the film, put it on your phone, put it in flight mode, go into the forests at like midnight, and then watch the movie on your phone.
Now we're talking.
Why walking around?
Yeah, no. And also, like, if you don't really think you'll get the movie, come to Sweden, watch it with me. And when you go to the bathroom, I'll be standing in the corner when you come back, and we'll see if you get creeped out or not.
There'll be slime on your seat when you get back.
Yes, slime. No, but alternatively, watch this movie and go camping the day after. We'll see if it's
God,
scary
that
or
would
not.
actually be terrifying.
Oh, I would be shitting bricks. But no, yeah, that's the Blair Witch Project. Really good movie.
Good movie.
Yeah, thank you so much for listening to the Cinema Crash podcast. Thank you so much for coming back on, Ali. Can you please leave the call now?
No.
Oh.
See you next week.
See you next week. Where we'll have a seance. I'll call an exorcist to try and get the spirit of Ali out of my computer.
But now, Karl, how can you be sure there is the spirit of Ali and it's not just Asuka messing with you this whole time?
Yeah, that's so true.
More likely than you think. Yeah.
It's the townspeople.
No, I think we really next week we get an exorcist and we perform a Brexit, and that should work, right?
This is just Ali's attempt to avoid leaving the EU.
Don't remind me. The Brexit Witch Project.
Yeah, no. Thank you for listening to the podcast. I've been Karl. I've been joined by Ali and Asuka. Relevant socials are in the descriptions as usual. We will see you in 2 weeks' time.
Bye-bye.